Good day, everyone. Welcome to Geeky Gaming. The build you're about to see today was the first one I came up with in Monster Hunter Wilds because I thought the Foray skill just looked really unique. And after using the build for most of high rank and then upgrading the parts for late game, this has become a staple build for me to use. It's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of dynamic parts of this build with all the moving parts for the hunt. Just makes it a really good time. The double status part of this build gives you a lot of options to fit in how you'd like to play. So definitely change things up for the weapons that you'd like to play in this that work for you. I just used longsword because I wanted to play longsword. And in addition to all the status proccing that you'll be doing throughout the hunt, you'll also be rewarded for a bunch of damage while the monster is suffering from your statuses. It's super cool. So let me get over to my corner over here and I'll show you the build. Hey y'all, Geeky Gaming here, and I'm partnering with Marvel Strike Force. Marvel Strike Force is a dynamic squad-based RPG that brings the Marvel universe to life. Players assemble powerful teams of their favorite Marvel heroes and villains to battle iconic enemies in epic combat with endless team combinations and strategic gameplay. And I've got free characters for you, including my favorites, Rocket and Groot. All you gotta do is click the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen, and you'll be all set. With a huge roster of characters, multiple game modes, and all the fun ways that you can put teams together, you'll never run out of ideas and options to progress in the game. Characters often possess unique abilities that boost their teammates, which adds an awesome layer of synergies and strategy in team building. If you're a fan of Marvel, strategy games, or building powerful teams that have unique synergies like I do, you're gonna love Marvel Strike Force. And good news, Marvel Strike Force is celebrating their 7-year anniversary, which means there's a bunch of freebies for you to pick up. For a limited time only, use the promo code 7 to unlock Nightcrawler and Cyclops at no cost to you. Just use the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen to download Marvel Strike Force and get started today. Enjoy the game, and thanks to Marvel Strike Force for partnering with Geeky Gaming. Now back to the video. All right, double status longsword build. Now there's a couple of caveats to this build that I'll explain to you in just a minute here, but let me get into the core of it, and then I'll explain the changes that you can make with it as well. The long short of this build is that we're playing around the skill Foray. Foray is a really interesting skill that procs in a couple ways. It increases our attack damage by a flat amount and gives us 20% affinity at level 5 here whenever we inflict the monster with poison or paralysis. The word "or" there is really important because we can use both paralysis and poison on this build to trigger those effects more often. You're not stuck into one. And so I made a build that uses a weapon of each status type so that you can trigger each of those statuses easier. In Monster Hunter, when you want to trigger a status effect, there's a certain damage threshold you have to hit with that type of damage in order to trigger the effect. So for example, when we're using our paralysis longsword here, when we do it, the element damage to it, the status element to it, when we hit a certain damage threshold, the monster will be paralyzed. And then when it gets paralyzed, we can beat up the monster while it's standing still. If we want to trigger that paralysis again, the threshold goes up. We have to do more damage of that type in order to trigger that paralysis again. So instead of fighting the increased paralysis threshold amount, I instead opted for just making a second weapon that does a different status that triggers Foray. So we've got the poison element here on one longsword and the paralysis element here on another longsword. And the way that the hunt will work is that we'll get into the hunt with the monster. We'll fight it with this paralysis longsword until the monster gets paralyzed. When the monster's paralyzed, we will unload all of our damage, as much as we possibly can, until the paralysis goes away on the monster. And then we will jump on our bird and swap over to our poison element longsword so that we can trigger the poison element quicker than we can trigger another paralysis on the monster. And fun thing with the poison element, poison lasts longer on a monster than paralysis does. So we'll actually have more time to do more damage with the poison build. So it's pretty cool. Once we get both of the statuses triggered, then we can stick with the poison weapon and poison it again because the threshold's already raised for both weapons. Once the poison's gone for the second time, then we jump back on our bird and switch back to the paralysis weapon and fight it until we trigger the paralysis, unload all our damage, and then we keep going from there. It's pretty fun. It's a pretty fun rotation that we do in the hunt to get the maximum amount of damage that we can from Foray, as well as run status weapons, which are pretty cool. They're interesting statuses to run here. Now, here's the caveat for this build. I picked longsword because I just wanted to play longsword. I play all the weapons of the game. I like the variety, and I had been playing dual blades like crazy prior to making this build, so I wanted to play a different weapon, and I picked longsword. Longsword is not the best weapon you can pick for this build because every time you swap your weapon to your bird, you need to recharge your spirit gauge on longsword, which takes time. And sometimes you trigger the statuses on these weapons before you get to red gauge, which is where most of your damage is at. And so there's some damage wasted there. But like I said, I'm not here to play the #1 most damage every second of the hunt. I'm here to have fun. And so longsword was a way for me to have fun. So I built 2 longswords for this. This build's really flexible. You can play basically any weapon you want in these 2 slots. And they don't even have to be the same weapon. You could do 1 dual blade and 1 bow if you wanted to, and do the exact same thing. Whatever weapons you play, just pick 1 that's a paralysis weapon and 1 that's a poison weapon, slot them into your build, and go to town. The Foray skill is on your armor, so you don't have to worry about that at all. You can mix and match this build with any weapon combination however you want. You don't even have to be locked in with the 2 weapons you put in the first time. You can swap it out with other things later, which is pretty cool. Here's the gems I slotted into the build, and you may be wondering, like, Tails, what are you doing with the rest of the build? Because Foray is just 1 piece of this build. Well, I just went for the Guardian Arcfield gear here because I wanted to play around Flare and Part Breaker, plus the set bonus from Guardian Arcfield. They all work really well together. It's not necessary for the Foray part, but when you're running status weapons, your damage is kind of low compared to just running raw damage. And so I wanted to make up some of the raw damage that's missing and put in skills that do a lot of damage. So we're playing around wounds with Flare and Part Breaker. We want to pop wounds, then we do more damage with the Part Breaker. And then Flare lets us make wounds more often. Guardian Arcfield gear lets us heal when we pop wounds, which is fun. And then, if you know me, there's always a Tails tax, a Giddy Fox Gaming tax on our builds. I run Mushroom-mancer on everything. Mushroom-mancer is like Frank's hot sauce for me. I put that stuff on everything. I just really like the skill. If you don't want to run Mushroom-mancer, you can swap these boots out for whatever else you want. But I use the Dover boots right now because I don't have the better boots yet. And I just put a Mushroom-mancer deco in here to get to Mushroom-mancer 3. Use whatever you want for the boots, though. This is what I did for this, and it works out pretty good. And then the last things that are in here, Quick Sheath is for longsword specifically. It works well with longsword. You can swap these 2 out for whatever you wanted to. And on the weapons, I went for a mix of status and crit. The Rathian longsword has critical status on it already and poison duration up, which is so good. And I think most of the Rathian weapons have that for any weapon. So that's a pretty good pick there for those. So I just slotted in some critical as well as some poison buildup gems here. And then on the Lalabarina longsword, it also has critical status on there. So I maxed it out, added some paralysis damage, and then added crit. So there's the build. And the best way to show off how this build works is to go take it to a hunt. So let's jump in to an SOS flare and take out a monster, and I'll show you how it works. No better way to start than with some coffee. All right, we found a big octopus we got to hunt. Looks like someone needs some help with this guy. So we'll bring in the paralysis here, need some mushrooms along the way. All right, we are starting on a paralysis weapon here with a Lalabrina longsword. I will get down here, get chopping. We're looking for the paralysis and to not do a helm splitter until we get the paralysis triggered, if possible. We want to get to red gauge ASAP, then trigger the paralysis. Then, whoopsie, then go for, man, get beat up. Then go for the helm splitter while it's paralyzed to get all of our damage pulled off. Then swap weapons. There we go. All right. There we go. One more to go here. There's red gauge. Now we just stay in red gauge. There's the paralysis. We're going to go for the helm breaker here. Get our damage pulled off. Awesome. And we're going to stay attacking until the paralysis is gone, which just ended. So now I'm going to go call in Bert, my bird, and swap to the poison weapon and do the exact same thing. But now we're looking to trigger the poison element. We'll get up to red gauge ASAP here. Now, obviously, this build goes even more crazy when your whole team is running status, right? Because then you're triggering more statuses more often. Your damage goes ways up. But you can't control what your teammates are running. So this is the bare minimum. We're in red gauge now. We're looking for the poison status. Our cat will tell us sometimes, which our cat's not here. You'll also see the constant damage tick. It's already going right now. So we're looking for a moment to helm breaker. I'll go now. Perfect. Got our damage pulled off. Now we stay on this build because we're going to trigger paralysis or poison at this point. The threshold's already been increased for both. So I'm going to stay in poison so I don't have to read equip my weapon here. Oh, that actually hit me. Crazy. And we're gonna pop a wound if we can here. Awesome. Free gauge charge. Okay, there's Paralysis. We have a teammate running status, which is nice, so I can go for a Helm Splitter right away here. Nice. And now we actually want to stay in poison for longer on this hunt because we have a teammate doing Paralysis. We don't need to increase the threshold more for Paralysis. And so we're going to stay on a different threshold number with the poison buildup. And whenever we see the monster get paralyzed by our teammate, we're going to dump all of our damage before the Paralysis goes away. Like I said, I'm playing 2 longswords on this build, so it's not as good as it would be with other weapons for this. But I just like longswords, so it's fun to play with this one. You can do whatever you want to in that regard. And obviously, there's some really busted weapons you can pick with this. Dual blades would do well with this. Bow would do really well with this. So would light bowgun, actually. And so you can mix and match how you see fit for what you want to do in the hunt. Just pick the appropriate weapon with the appropriate status that you want and go get them. Oh my gosh, that's a lot of damage. Now, we don't even have the status proc yet. It's going to get bigger. I'm going to try to cut off some more of these arms. That's fun. He'll leave it again. What a scaredy octopus. I want to burn my red gauge here before it goes away. Even though we don't have the status triggered, I'd rather get all my damage off there before that red gauge is gone. That's just longsword mechanics, so it's not necessarily with this build. Oh, big miss. Wound I want to pop. Will I get to it? Probably not. That's okay though. There's a wound. We can get that one maybe. Ah! Perfect. Let's take that. Another arm cut off. We're back in red gauge as well, so we're looking for the poison status. There's the poison. It just went on. Oh, maybe not. Maybe not. Nope, that was just 1 damage hit. Okay. Oops, missed that. One of these. There we go. Be mad. Our red gauge is about gone here. Oh, a little early. We're gonna try to swing this right now. Yeah, let's do it. Perfect. And it's dead. That's how you do it. And there's the double status longsword build around Foray. Don't get caught up on the longswords if you don't want to play longsword. You can play whatever weapon you want here that has those statuses and swap them in. But it's a really fun way to trigger lots of statuses and get lots of damage in there. And I think one of the really cool parts about this build is that we're actually using the weapon swapping mechanic in Wilds. I think that's an underused, but it's not that good of a mechanic in the game. But if we could try it out, we may as well. And Foray gives you a really great option to utilize the weapon swapping mechanic very well for some big damage payoffs. So enjoy your hunts with Foray. Thanks for watching and happy hunting. I'll catch you in the next one, okay?